Today on an all-new Dr. Phil, the mystery of Natalie Wood's death.
They were fighting. You could hear things being thrown around the stateroom.
What were they arguing about?
He was being extremely jealous. He picked up a bottle of wine. He smashed it on that table. Glass went all over.
The boat's captain speaks out.
Robert Wagner was standing at the back of the boat, and he looked at me and he said, "Natalie's missing."
Was it an accident?
Robert Wagner has denied that he had anything to do with his wife's death.
Shocking new allegations.
I said, "We need to call for help." He said, "No, we're not going to do that."
So you, Christopher Walken, and Robert Wagner, he's saying the three of you have to get your stories straight.
Correct.
And what was the story that you got straight?
She slipped and fell into the water and drowned.
You believe Robert Wagner murdered Natalie Wood?
I really do.
Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
Today's going to be a changing day in your life.
5, 4.
I am not giving up on you. It was the mysterious death of a Hollywood star that shocked the world. Beautiful brown-eyed star Natalie Wood drowned while yachting with her handsome husband, leading man Robert Wagner. For 30 years, Natalie's sister has wondered how Natalie, who was deathly afraid of the ocean, ended up in the cold, dark water that night over 3 decades ago. Her final moments shrouded in mystery. Natalie's drowning death was ruled an accident, but in 2011, the case was shockingly reopened. We ran out of time yesterday as Natalie's sister, Lana Wood, reveals why she believes her sister was murdered. Take a look. What do you think happened to Natalie that night?
There's no doubt in my mind that he wasn't responsible.
Are you suggesting that he knocked her out in some way and threw her in the water?
RJ suggested that she left to go to a party in a nightgown with a pair of woolen socks. None of it makes any sense.
Natalie Wood apparently slipped, hit her head, and drowned.
Her husband, actor Robert Wagner, remains in seclusion at their home today.
The coroner's office said today that actress Natalie Wood was intoxicated and angry after an argument between her husband and actor Christopher Walken.
Investigators questioned those involved in the frantic late-night search. Miss Wood apparently left the salon of the family yacht alone. It was here that she fell and drowned.
Lana actually confronted Robert Wagner, demanding answers.
Why won't you speak to the detectives?
I have talked to everybody.
Do you anything?
You've accused me of murdering her.
You never for 1 minute stopped and said, "This is what happened."
The death of an actress, Natalie Wood, is still one of Hollywood's greatest unsolved mysteries.
For years, the case closed.
The medical examiner changed the manner of Wood's death from accidental to undetermined.
In 2012, the Los Angeles Coroner's Office amended Natalie's death certificate.
Police now believe that she was the victim of foul play.
You say, and the police say, that Robert's story has changed.
Well, initially he said that there was no confrontation. However, in his own book, he has since admitted that a wine bottle was broken on that night.
In the parlor at that time were Christopher Walken, Natalie, and Robert Wagner.
And also on board was Dennis Deverne, who the boat skipper. Dennis's own version of events is chilling.
There were 3 Hollywood stars on the yacht Splendor the night Natalie Wood died. Natalie, her husband Robert Wagner, and actor Christopher Walken. But they were not alone. There was someone else who says he witnessed everything that went on in the hours leading up to Natalie's death. Captain Dennis Deverne. And he's joining us now, along with Marty Rulli, the co-author of their book, Goodbye, Natalie, Goodbye, Splendor. You were on that boat.
Yes.
We've seen the boat. I've been on exactly that make and model and size of boat. It's close quarters. It would be hard to be certainly inside and not hear what was going on. So you heard what was happening.
Yes, I did, Dr. Phil. I could hear Well, the argument started in the salon of the boat.
Right.
And that's where the arguing started. And Christopher, Natalie, RJ, and myself, we were all there in the salon when the fighting began there, and there was a smashing of a wine bottle on a coffee table in front of us. The fight got stronger, and then it went down below to their stateroom.
What were they arguing about, by the way?
I really believe it was all jealousy over Natalie resurrecting her career.
Well, you were there. You heard what was said.
Well,
what did he say?
Well, when we were at the restaurant, we had dinner at the restaurant. The arguing actually started because RJ wanted to leave the restaurant, where we really wanted to sit around after having the meal and having a glass of wine. He insisted that we leave. So that started to ruffle the feathers at that time. By the time we got back to the boat, things were building very, very strong. And that's when Natalie was getting so upset because of the way RJ was acting. I mean, he was being extremely jealous. Mm-hmm. And at that point, that's when he picked up a bottle of wine. He smashed it on that table. Glass went all over us and the whole inside of the salon of the boat. And that's when Natalie went down below, and Christopher went forward to his stateroom.
Was he accusing Natalie, or was he accusing Christopher?
He wasn't really accusing either one, but it was obvious. He was focusing on both of them as being guilty.
Now, you went to her stateroom and she was gone.
I went to
Did you go to check on her?
No, when they were fighting, and it was very, very loud, and you could hear things being thrown around the stateroom. It was just a whole lot of noise and a whole lot of yelling. And I started to get very concerned, so I knocked on the door. And Robert Wagner opened the door and he says, "Go away." I said, "Well, I better go away, you know." So I went up to the pilot house, and I turned the music on because I didn't want them to think that I was eavesdropping.
You hear this going on in the stateroom. They're throwing things around in there. There's nothing to throw in there except luggage and belongings and that sort of thing, right?
Correct.
So you go there, he tells you to go away. Then it gets quiet, right?
Yes. When everything got quiet, I thought something just isn't right. So I went to the back of the boat, and Robert Wagner's standing at the back of the boat. And he looked at me and he said, "Natalie's missing." I thought, I really couldn't comprehend it. He said, "Search the boat."
That can't take, that's this long.
No, that was very quick.
You get back to Robert Wagner, who's standing still on the back of the boat?
Yes.
Okay, so it's obviously she's not on the boat.
Obviously, no.
Okay, so your conclusion is what?
I just didn't know, you know.
Well, she's either on the boat or she's in the water.
I said, we need to call for help. I said, we had a big searchlight on the top of the boat. I said, I'm going to go turn that searchlight on to see if we can see her. He says, "Don't do that." You know, I said, "Don't do that." I said, "We need to call somebody. We need to call for some help." And he said, "No, we're not going to do that."
You're the captain of the boat, and you know you've got a passenger likely in the water. Why do you not do what you have to do?
I was never the captain on the boat. When he bought the boat, he hired me to maintain the boat. RJ was a great boat handler. He was always in charge. He was the one that, I was the one that tied the lines. He was the one that drove.
As a common sense person standing there, did it not occur to you to look for someone in the water? If they're not on the boat, they're in the water.
You could see the look on his face. I was a little bit on the scared side.
You were afraid for your life?
Correct. Robert Wagner is telling us we have to get our story straight.
He's telling this to you and who?
Christopher Walken.
He even got you a role on Heart to Heart, the TV show, to buy your silence.
And later, you believe when you were standing on the back of that boat and he said, "Don't turn on that searchlight," you were talking to a murderer. You believe Robert Wagner murdered Natalie Wood.
Monday on an all-new Dr. Phil. Why is this former cheerleader
When I'm mad, I lose all control.
taking out her anger
She's giving me black eyes.
He's done the exact same stuff to me.
on her fiance?
You broke the plate and then you storm off. You got scratches on your neck, you got scratches on your back. I don't care. What I care is that you guys are getting physical. That's dangerous.
All new season of Dr. Phil. That's Monday.
So you're standing there thinking she's in the water and I'm afraid of him. So what did you do instead?
Well, he said, look, let's just wait. Maybe she went ashore to the restaurant. The digging was gone. I'm thinking to myself, plus the other thing is when we were all at the restaurant, we were all drinking a lot. And, you know, he said, look, let's just have a drink and let's just try to see if we, you know, let's just calm down. And I'm thinking, damn, we really need to call the Coast Guard. He didn't want to have any parts of that. He pours a drink, let's have a drink, have a drink. Time goes by, hours go by.
Doug Oden, the harbor master who finally showed up, and he is who insisted that they call the Coast Guard. 7 people were manipulated that night to not search for Natalie.
So hours went by.
Yeah.
So she may have been unconscious, or she may have, the cold water may have brought her around. She may have been fighting for her life all this time. She may have been unconscious. We don't know.
This strikes me as really perplexing. Your wife is missing, yet you don't call the Coast Guard that searches the water. Why did he not do it? And what did he say to you?
He just said, we're not going to do anything right now.
And you drank alcohol with him?
We stood on the back of the boat and drank.
Where was Christopher Walken during this time?
He was in his stateroom.
Did anybody go check his stateroom to see if she was in there?
When Robert Wagner asked me to check the boat, when I checked my stateroom, I thought I better check Christopher's stateroom to be on the safe side. I opened the door. He was in his bed by himself. I checked the other stateroom. There was another guest stateroom. There wasn't anybody there.
She could have been saved. Isn't that the hardest thing to reconcile? That had that call have been made, had Robert have made that call, she might have been saved.
Now, what was the original story that you told the police back then?
Did you give a statement at that time? No. Well, it was written for you.
Yeah, what happened was when RJ and Christopher had left the boat and I was left to identify Natalie's body, then I was told I was going to be taken directly to Robert Wagner's house. And we don't say a word to anybody. We all have three of us have our stories straight.
Who's getting the story straight?
Robert Wagner is telling us we have to get our story straight, and this is what happened.
He's telling this to you and who?
Christopher Walken.
Okay, so you, Christopher Walken, and Robert Wagner, he's saying the three of you have to get your story straight.
Correct.
Okay, and what was the story that you got straight?
The story was that when they went down below and that Natalie was going to retire for the night, that the dinghy was banging up against the boat, and she went outside to untie the dinghy, which the dinghy was properly tied to the back of the boat. Mm-hmm. And when she untied the dinghy to move it away from the boat, which she would have never done in a million years, she wouldn't even go outside in the dark and the cold and the rough, the way things were. She would never do it. And so, being we said that she did this, then she slipped and fell into the water and drowned.
And this story was given to you by who?
By Robert Wagner.
He said, this is the story we're going to tell.
Correct.
And where did he get the story?
That's what he had to dream up. because there was nothing else he could think of. We got to the house. He said, this is going to be your lawyer. You know, I didn't know who he was, but he was appointed to me. Christopher had his, and RJ had his.
You were coerced by Robert. He even got you a role on Heart to Heart, the TV show, to buy your silence.
Yeah, he did that. He got me into the Screen Actors Guild, extras. And,
did he get you a lawyer?
Yes, he did. Yes.
And you lived with him in the immediate aftermath?
Did he move you into the guest house?
No, I was inside the main house upstairs and kind of remained prisoner in the house.
And Dennis's family were not allowed to contact him.
You told none of this to the police?
He told it to me.
You got to understand, Dr. Phil, the police weren't that interested.
They were not.
At the time.
He told it to me, and I told the police.
Walken and Wagner
yes, at the time.
left the island immediately on a helicopter. They didn't speak to police. The initial investigation from the outset was botched. Make no mistake about it.
Celebrityhood has a great deal of power, a great deal. And you don't just openly go against someone, and you don't want to think the worst of them either.
Well, but I want to talk to Marty for a second here. You told the police everything he's just told me.
Yes, I did. A lot of people say, why did we wait 30 years? No, we didn't wait the 30 years. The law and the media, mainstream media, waited 30 years.
It fell on deaf ears.
From 1980s through the 90s, 2000s, I even called and spoke with the 2 original detectives on the 1981 case, and I told them I will stop publication of my book if you will take another look, just another look at Natalie's case, and they refused to do it. So I said, go ahead, have the book published, and it still took work. I'm just this regular person from New Jersey who did a better investigation into Natalie Wood's case than the professionals.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back, and from a psychological perspective, I've got some questions that I just have to ask that I think really bear on what may have happened here. And I think between Dennis and Dylan, there may be some answers here. I'll be right back.
Natalie was married to Robert twice. She left him the first time because she walked in on him having an affair with the butler. Lana?
Yes.
And later, if they had called for help earlier, do you believe your sister would be alive today?
Yes.
Are you angry at Dennis for not saying, hell with you, I'm searching for this woman? Well, we're back, and we're talking about the tragic death of Natalie Wood. She was on a boat with her husband, Robert Wagner. She was on a boat with Christopher Walken and Dennis DeVerne, who was on the boat as well. And here's what Robert Wagner had to say about the night Natalie Wood died in an interview in 2008. Now, Robert Wagner spoke to CBS News broadcast Sunday morning. Take a look.
I got into an argument with Chris, which I really started a little bit because he was saying what a wonderful actress she is. They were doing a film together, and he said, you know, I really think she should really spend more time on her career, and you know, that would be nice. And I got a little bit angry about that. I said, you know, what are you getting involved with her and her career for? And one thing led to another, and I got very upset with him, and we got into not a physical altercation, but an altercation that took us out on the deck, and I was angry at him. We came back down below. I looked below. I saw Natalie was doing something with her hair. She was going to go to bed, and she shut the door, and Chris and I were still talking. We weren't particularly arguing then, you know. And sat up for a while, and when I went down below, she wasn't there. And I looked around for her, and I didn't know where she was. I went back above her. I got Dennis, the kid I had working for me on the boat, and Chris, and I said, you know, we never heard anything. The dinghy was gone. We never heard it start. We never heard anything at all. We were so in love, and we had everything. And in a second it was gone. I wasn't there. I wasn't there for her. She slipped and hit the step and then rolled in. That's what we think happened.
Okay, now, he's talking about all of this fighting and all of this relationship dynamic that's gone on. Now, Dylan Howard has put together a podcast that's called Fatal Voids, The Mysterious Death of Natalie Wood. You found out a lot about the relationship dynamics that were going on, the arguing. What all was happening relationship-wise, and what was the relationship between Robert Wagner and Christopher Walken?
So this is intriguing and has been one of the theories that we have explored. Natalie was married to Robert twice. She left him the first time because she walked in on him having an affair with the hired help, the butler. Lana?
Yes.
A man. One of the theories that has been suggested for years, whispered around the traps, is that perhaps Natalie walked in on Robert and Christopher, as absurd as that may sound. Giving rise to the speculation about that is a document that we unearthed, which is the official lifeguard log from the night in question. And there is a reference to a sexual incident that occurred. We don't know if that was Natalie and Christopher and Robert. We just don't know. That's one theory that has been played out.
Mm-hmm. Now, but it certainly could have created some tension.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. Now, this lifeguard log, let's take a look at this. This is November 29th, 1981, and it says, also known Christopher Walken and Robert Wagner were engaged in sexual activity in cab of boat, and it's illegible, that Ms. Woods found both of them together illegible, stated that they took her away in a illegible. Now, do we have the entire page, the picture of the entire page, not just the call out? Because this handwriting in the log and this handwriting in the log, you know, we have this part here, and then we have this part down here, and this is very different handwriting.
It is. It's the first question I asked. And the explanation from the source that provided me that document was that there were 2 lifeguards involved in the initial investigation. The initial part of the document was authored by 1 lifeguard. The second portion, the more scandalous portion, was authored by a 2nd lifeguard.
Okay, and you're saying authored, not altered?
Authored.
Okay, well, you talk funny.
You know, I'm Australian, Dr. Phil.
Was this written at the same time as the other?
It was written contemporaneously,
okay,
yes.
And why 2 authors?
Because there were 2 lifeguards that handled the initial investigation.
Okay.
One of those is dead. Another one is not speaking. He's refused to talk about this case now. He says he's done talking because he doesn't believe justice has been served.
All right. And is one Roger Smith?
Yes.
Okay, because we have some audio of him. One of the lifeguards was Roger Smith, who led the lifeguard team that searched for Natalie, and he's the one who actually pulled her body out of the water. Here's a clip of his interview on the podcast, Fatal Voyage, The Mysterious Death of Natalie Wood. Let's listen to it.
He said, we've had the shore boats and the harbor patrol go to every boat in the harbor, and we couldn't locate her. He said, look, here's the boat right here. And Wagner said, we didn't call them because we're a public agency, and she might be fooling around on somebody's boat, and she often does that. I found out by one of the Marine Science Center students who studies anatomy over there and worked the chamber with me. that she could have lived 3 to 5.8 hours hanging onto that raft, being blown out to sea before she succumbed to the cold based on what alcohol level she had on her, hanging onto the safety line that goes along the side of it. Her hands were still pliable, you know, so nothing had set in yet.
No rigor mortis.
No rigor mortis at all. And her facial, she looked like she hadn't been dead very long. I looked out at the raft. As I looked at it, I saw some scratch marks on the, you know, they didn't scratch into the material, but like somebody was clawing on the side of it.
It's staggering.
So what does that suggest? That she became conscious, at least, or at some point was conscious, was hanging onto this raft and may have been clawing, trying to get up in the raft from the water.
True. Natalie Wood didn't have to die.
I think the argument got out of control. She was dead when she hit the water.
You believe Robert Wagner murdered Natalie Wood? Did this woman stay in the water for 3.5 to 5 hours hoping somebody was coming for her in the dark?
That's what I always thought.
And never
she
came.
could have lived.
That she could be alive today.
And the reason why is because of lies, jealousy, greed, and things like that.
There's a lot of evidence she was not alive in the water. If she kicked and tried to climb the dinghy and save herself in the water, how could she have been found with socks on? Something totally overlooked by a coroner. She was found with socks on, wool socks. I got in the water. They come off within 30 seconds without moving. She was
maybe
not
they
alive.
do, maybe they don't. They come off of you. I don't know. Are you angry at Dennis for not saying, hell with you, I'm searching for this woman?
No.
Why not?
Because I understand how he felt at the time. I didn't want to believe that anything had happened other than what was said. But in the back of my mind, it kept bothering me, which is why I went upstairs and said, tell me what happened. But you don't want to think that. It's almost like a defense mechanism. You want to bury your head and accept whatever is happening so you don't have to hear the ugly truth.
If they had called for help earlier, do you believe your sister would be alive today?
Yes. And I think if she was unconscious when she hit the water, which is what the new coroner findings are, someone still could have jumped in and pulled her out.
Have you replayed this in your mind? Are you mad at yourself that you didn't do something different?
Well, I actually don't think, I think she was dead when she hit the water. She was unconscious, you know, I mean, when she hits the water, I mean, they said there wasn't any water in her lungs.
So what is your theory?
I think the argument got out of control, and she was knocked unconscious by a physical fight from Robert Wagner and put in the water.
So you believe when you were standing on the back of that boat and he said, don't turn on that searchlight, you were talking to a murderer?
Exactly.
You believe Robert Wagner murdered Natalie Wood?
I really do.
We'll be right back. She spent the night before off the boat with you in her room.
Things were very unstable. The next morning, she wanted to fly out of there to get a seaplane and fly off the island and come back to the mainland. She couldn't get a seaplane. That was the last night of her life.
Today, the death of Natalie Wood still haunts all of those who loved her. And if, like her sister suspects, the actress was murdered, then why? Dylan, what have you learned about this couple? And for example, she spent the night in Avalon the night before off the boat with you in her room. I'm not suggesting inappropriately, just you in her room. Why? What
did she tell you that night? You and I spoke about this. What did she tell you that night in the room about the state of her relationship with Robert?
Things were very unstable as in the relationship. You know, I mean, she was constantly trying to keep things, you know, on an even keel. And, you know, the next morning she wanted to fly out of there to get a seaplane and fly off the island and come back to the mainland. And she couldn't get a seaplane. I think she wanted to give it another try, you know, by saying, hey, let's go back to the boat. We'll make a breakfast. You know, she was famous for making a huevos ranchero breakfast, and you know, let's see if we, you know, because we talked quite a bit, you know, just as friends and stuff like that. And I said, that's a good idea. Let's go back there and, you know, make the breakfast and everything like that. Well, then that night, that was the last night of her life.
How long had they been on the boat? How many days had they been on the boat?
We went over there on a Thursday, and we were due to come back Sunday.
Okay, and which night did you spend in Avalon?
Friday night.
Okay, so Thursday night you were on the boat. Was there a blow up on the boat that made her go stay in the hotel?
When he wanted to move the boat.
He wanted to move the boat to Two Harbors.
She didn't want to move the boat.
Move it around.
Mm-hmm.
From Avalon all the way down to Twin Harbors, which is, you know, at nighttime, you don't really take a boat out at nighttime off the coast of Catalina because there's a lot of rocks.
Right.
It's just not a smart thing to do. Mm-hmm. And that's what really irritated her enough to the point where she said, Dennis and I are going to go ashore.
Was she afraid of him?
I don't think she was afraid of him.
Did you have romantic feelings for her?
No. I mean, I think she was a beautiful woman, but I always had respect. I had respect from Robert Wagner and her all the time. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd say, wow, she's a really beautiful woman, but you know, I kept it in my mind that they were people I respect, I work for.
Did you think Christopher had romantic feelings for either of them?
Well, the way Christopher and Natalie were together on the boat that weekend, giggling, having a good time, talking about their movie and talking about that, you know, they got along very good. I mean, they got along great. So, you know, I could see. What movie had they just done together? They just done one together? They were doing the movie Brainstorm. Okay, that's what they were doing at the time? Yes. Mm-hmm. Now, you were given a polygraph by the police. Yes. And you passed the polygraph. Correct. What were the questions? Just about every question you asked me so far. So they asked you a whole series of questions? Yeah, we were in an interview room for quite a few hours. On a polygraph? No, on an interview, in an interview room. And I felt very comfortable with the two detectives. And just out of the clear blue, the one detective says, my God, Dennis, this is really amazing, all the stuff that you're telling us. And he looked at me real nonchalantly and he said, would you take a polygraph test? You know, how people would say it kind of like in a joking around way. And I said, yeah, I absolutely would. He put his hand on the doorknob of the interview room, opened the door, and there was a Los Angeles polygraph examiner standing there. He says, come right this way. Oh, are you serious? I thought they were kind of joking around, but they weren't joking around. And the story you're telling these detectives that were nice guys is the story that you had gotten straight with Robert Wagner. The story I was telling the detectives was the true story. It didn't have anything to do with,
so this was when?
2011.
So this was currently, this was currently, now. Yes.
And the case was reopened.
Okay, when they reopened the case, you took it and told them the truth that you're telling us today, and you passed that polygraph. Witnesses say they heard screams and a woman crying right before Natalie vanished.
There was commotion on board, that it was so loud that they could hear from boats nearby.
Do you have any idea in the police record why Robert Wagner did not identify his own wife's body?
He flew off Catalina Island on a helicopter back to Los Angeles and left Dennis to ID the body.
RJ and Christopher, they got on the helicopter and they were gone. They said, RJ said, would you identify Natalie's body? Of course, I'm not going to say no.
Now, witnesses have come forward and say they heard screams and a woman crying right before Natalie vanished, correct?
Yeah, these are so-called ear witnesses.
Yeah, and what do they testify they heard?
That there was commotion on board,
right?
That it was so loud that they could hear from boats nearby.
Right. And wasn't there testimony or a statement from another boat that they heard a woman calling for help?
Yes.
And was this from John Wayne's boat?
This was Marilyn Wayne, who has spoken to the LA County Sheriff's Department and said she heard certain things in the water. But again, this just adds to the intrigue surrounding it, because if Marilyn Wayne heard someone in the water, that means Natalie was alive. But police believe that she was unconscious now before she went into the water.
And
what if she wasn't in the water? What if she was calling for help on board?
What does she say she heard?
She says that she heard commotion, that she heard Robert speaking and suggesting that she was going off on board to another boat.
Okay. And who was it that heard a woman saying, help me, help me?
Marilyn Wayne.
And was there testimony that a drunken man said, okay, honey, we'll get you, or something?
There have been really conflicting accounts, and so many. You said at the start of the program that over 100 people had come forward. Right. And you have to understand that we're trying to recall something that happened almost 4 decades ago. And therein lies the issue for police. They want to bring justice to this case. They ideally would like to speak to Robert Wagner. But are they going to be successful if they were to charge him with murder? And therein lies the issue. The District Attorney of Los Angeles, my understanding is, they don't want to take this case on because they're not sure that they'll get a conviction against Robert Wagner.
Wow. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to see where all of this winds up and what's most likely to happen. We'll be right back. Well, we've been talking about Natalie Wood and her tragic death. And I want to thank you, Lana, for being here and sharing this. I know it's hard. And I appreciate that. And thank you for coming, and thank you guys for being so candid about everything. And thank you for going forward when you did back at the time. At least she had a voice, somebody raising their hand.
That's what it was for.
Back at the time. I want to point again that Robert Wagner has always maintained that he is 100% innocent in the death of his wife, Natalie Wood. He's not here to defend himself. If he was, I'm sure he would say that he has absolutely nothing to do with it, that he was not involved in any way, and that it happened just the way that he says, that it was an accident. He's not been charged in this case. We reached out to Robert, but we did not hear back before our broadcast deadline. And if we do get a statement, then we'll certainly include it. So I want to thank all of my guests today, and I hope that Lana finds peace and healing after the loss of her sister. Again, the podcast is called Fatal Voyage, The Mysterious Death of Natalie Wood. I highly recommend it. For information, go to drphil.com. We'll see you next time. Dennis, thank you so much.